They called it the South Asylum, though most people in town didn't call it anything at all. The old psychiatric hospital had been shut down for decades, its name erased from every sign, its halls left to rot. Locals crossed the street rather than walk near its crumbling gates. But for people like Hannah, Chris, and Mark, the buildup wasn't just an eyesore. It was a lure. Urban explorers hunted for places like this, the ones that carried whispers of tragedy, abandonment, and secrets buried behind padlocks. The asylum was a trophy few dared to enter, and on that windless autumn night, the three of them stood before its rusted fence, hearts racing. "Shortcut through here," Chris muttered, prying open a bent section of wire. His grin caught the beam of Hannah's flashlight, teeth gleaming in the dark. This place is supposed to have a sealed wing no one's been in for 40 years. Imagine the footage. They slipped through, the courtyard swallowing them whole. Weeds had grown chest high. Broken glass glittered in the moonlight, and the building loomed with rows of blackened windows, blank as blind eyes. The silence was suffocating. No owls, no insects, no passing cars. Just the crunch of their footsteps and the groan of old stone settling into decay. Inside, the air changed immediately, heavy, wet, and metallic. Hannah gagged at the faint smell of rust and chemicals. The hallways twisted like arteries, lined with peeling wallpaper that curled in strips. Their lights swept across tipped wheelchairs, rusted gurneys, and doors half off their hinges. The place seemed to watch them, every creak of the floorboards, echoing too long, like the building was whispering back. Chris was in his element, narrating for the camera strapped to his chest. "Main wing, east corridor. Looks like it collapsed halfway down. Still intact enough to..." He stopped. Ahead of them, a door slammed shut. Mark nearly dropped his flashlight. "Wind," he muttered, though there hadn't been so much as a draft. Hannah's heart hammered as she shined her light at the door. Room 207. Its number plate dangling by a single nail. The lock was broken. "Let's check it," Chris said. "No," Hannah and Mark answered together. Voices sharp, but Chris was already pushing the door, stepping inside. Dust swirled around him. The room was bare except for an overturned bed frame and a leather restraint strap dangling from the ceiling light fixture. The strap swung lazily, though none of them had touched it. That was when Hannah decided she hated the place. They pressed on, deeper into the hospital. Each corridor seemed colder, and the air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Their flashlights flickered often, and Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that the dark between beams was more solid than it should be, as though something waited just outside their light. Finally they found it, the locked wing. At the end of a long hallway, two heavy double doors stood chained shut with thick rusted links. Across the paint, long since cracked and bubbled, someone had scrawled, "Do not enter," in red letters that had bled down the wood. Hannah's throat tightened as she read the words. They weren't the bright spray paint tags they'd seen in the main hall. These were older, smeared, dripping like they'd been painted in something far thicker. Chris's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is it, the locked wing." His hand closed around the chain and tugged. The doors rattled violently, echoing through the hospital like gunfire. Then something rattled back. The sound was faint but clear. Movement from the other side. A scrape along metal, like fingers brushing against the door. Hannah's breath caught. She grabbed Chris's arm, hissing, "Stop! Did you hear that?" The doors jerked inward, just slightly. The chain strained but held. A gust of air burst out from the gap. wet and sour, carrying the stench of mold, rot, and something faintly coppery. Hannah's light flickered, and in the moment of dimness she swore she saw it. A pale hand, long and thin, with too many joints, reaching through the gap before slipping back inside. They bolted. Down staircases, through collapsing wards, their footsteps thundered as panic overrode curiosity. They didn't stop until they were outside again, lungs burning in the night air. But Hannah's relief curdled as she looked back. The doors of the locked wing, once chained shut, now stood wide open. They hadn't planned to go back. After what they'd seen, the pale hand, the chain straining, the doors wide open when they fled, any sane person would have walked away. But fear and curiosity are twins, and curiosity has sharper teeth. It was Chris, of course, who convinced them. A week later, he sat in Hannah's living room, laptop open, replaying the footage he'd captured. The grainy image showed the locked wing doors shaking. Then came the unmistakable frame. Something slipping through the gap. A hand, not a shadow, not a trick of light, but a hand that didn't belong to any living human. "We have to go back," Chris said, eyes feverish. "Do you understand how rare this is? No one has gotten footage of that wing. No one. If we record more, inside this time, it'll be the biggest find in urban exploring. We'll be legends." Hannah wanted to scream at him. Mark swore he'd never step foot there again. But 3 nights later, under a sickle moon, they stood before the asylum gates again, pulled by something none of them could resist. This time, they came prepared. Headlamps, backup batteries, rope, even a crowbar. Chris carried the crowbar like a badge of courage as they crossed the dead courtyard, the building looming with its 100 staring windows. The air felt heavier than before, as if the asylum knew they were coming back. Inside, the silence greeted them like a living thing. Their boots cracked glass and scattered rats, but the deeper they went, the more the noises of life faded. By the time they reached the locked wing hallway, the only sounds left were their breathing and the faint buzz of their headlamps. The doors were still open. Chains dangled uselessly from the handles, rust flaking onto the floor. The black gap between them stretched wide, and the smell hit them instantly. Foul, wet, like rot scraped from the bottom of a well. Hannah's stomach turned. Mark whispered, "We shouldn't do this." Chris ignored him, stepping inside. The locked wing swallowed him whole. The air was colder here, biting at their skin. Their lights cut through layers of dust so thick the floor seemed snow-covered. The walls bore long scratches, deep gouges that dug into plaster and brick. Some claw marks were high, far too high for any person to have reached. Room after room lay empty, collapsed beds, overturned cabinets, padded cells with torn walls. But none of it was what unsettled Hannah most. It was the feeling of being led. The hallway stretched in unnatural ways, each corner pulling them deeper. She swore she could hear breathing, not theirs, hidden in the dark just behind them. Then came the voices. At first it was a single whisper, distant, unintelligible. Then more joined, overlapping, rising in pitch. A chorus of voices filled the wing, some sobbing, some laughing, others chanting in a tongue none of them understood. The sound didn't come from one direction, but from everywhere. Walls, ceilings, the very air. "Keep recording," Chris hissed, his voice trembling. They stumbled into a larger room. An old day room, judging by the collapsed couches and scattered playing cards. At the center was a chair bolted to the floor. leather restraints hanging limp. On the walls, messages had been scrawled in something dark. Hannah's light caught the words and froze. "Stay inside. Do not let it out." Mark cursed and backed toward the door. That was when it slammed shut. They whirled, headlamps flashing across the room, but no one was there. The chanting grew louder, overlapping screams tearing through the air. Hannah's chest heaved, her light jittering across the chair, where something now sat. It wasn't a person. Pale skin stretched over a long, angular body, limbs bent at wrong angles. Its face was smooth at first glance, but when Hannah's light steadied, she saw the features. Eyes sunken, mouth stretched too wide, lips split into a grin that never ended. Its head twitched, jerking like a broken puppet. And slowly, impossibly slowly, it turned toward them. "Run!" Mark whispered, but the door wouldn't budge. The thing stood. The restraints that had once bound it clattered to the floor as though freed after decades. It moved in jolts, each step too fast, too sudden, closing the space between them. Chris raised the crowbar and swung. The thing caught it midair, grip bone white, and bent the metal as if it were paper. Its grin widened. The voices rose into a shriek. Hannah grabbed Mark, pulling him toward the far wall where a broken vent yawned open. Without thinking, they crawled in, the narrow metal slicing their arms as they scrambled. Behind them, Chris screamed, cut off too quickly. The tunnel rattled. Something was following. They burst out into another corridor, gasping, covered in dust and blood. The asylum seemed alive now. Walls groaning, lights dying one by one. Hannah and Mark didn't stop. They ran until the night air struck their faces, until the gates of the asylum were far behind. When they finally dared to look back, the building was silent again. Still, but in the highest window of the locked wing, Hannah saw it, just for a second, a pale face, grinning, watching them go.